Alright guys, welcome back to another episode of the League Express podcast. My name's Jake Kearnan, and joining me as always is the editor of League Express, Martyn Sadler, and we're doing this the day after the Game 3 Origin decider which saw the Maroons win. Martyn, what did you think of the match?
Yeah, well, we ought to just point out we normally come out on a Tuesday, but on Tuesday I was a bit under the weather, Jake, so I couldn't. I thought it probably best to delay it for a couple of days, and I'm glad we did, really, because what a great Origin, incredible event it was. Queensland were the rank outsiders to go to Sydney and win the deciding game, but they were absolutely brilliant, and of course there was added pathos, wasn't there, because of Cam Munster's father having died at the weekend unexpectedly, and he obviously was released from the Queensland camp to go back to his family to obviously console his mother and relatives and so on, but came back into camp and then led Queensland to that incredible win. I mean, as a Queenslander yourself, Jake, tell us what it means to you.
Oh mate, it was quite emotional. As you said, we were very much the underdogs going into that match. A lot of disruption in the week leading up to it with Cam having to leave camp. And I was starting to get a little bit of PTSD from Game 2 when we got out to that good lead. And then you messaged me at halftime saying you must be feeling confident. And I replied, don't jinx it, Martyn. So that was in the back of my mind that, hey, the Blues can come back at, any chance, like if they get a sniff of it and they get a bit of momentum, they can get on a roll. But I don't know, I think I got to about midway through the second half and I thought, hang on a minute, I think they're actually going to get this done here.
Yes, yeah.
And
maybe
just on the
that brilliant tackle by Ben, what's his name? Tuo.
Toto,
Tuo, yes, by Tom Dearden. That finally convinced you that they were going to win, because that was just incredible, wasn't it?
And we got this thing over here. I mean, everyone hears about it, the Queensland Spirit, and there's all these moments in games where you go, that was a Queensland play, and that was genuinely one of those moments where you thought, he probably had nothing left in the tank, but he just kept pushing to make that tackle. And it was, you could just tell that there was many moments during that match where they were just, on their last breaths almost, but just kept pushing for one another. The Cam Munster thing, like, for him to back up a couple of days after his father had passed away, I don't think anyone would have begrudged him if he was going to sit that match out. But Billy Slater made a few comments throughout the week, and he said, when Munster left camp, he wasn't sure about a lot of things, but one thing he was sure of was that he was going to play on Wednesday night no matter what, which speaks volumes. It's courageous, brave, you might say. But,
And I think his father would have... I mean, the point that he made was that his father would have wanted him to play. His father was a very proud Queenslander, wasn't he? And, he would be... I mean, I don't know if you noticed, but when Cam Munster came onto the pitch leading the Queensland players out, he actually looked up at the sky and was obviously sort of saying to the spirit of his father, I'm here and I'm going to get the job done for you. And at that moment, I wish I'd placed £1,000 on Queensland to win.
Oh, mate, it would have been nice.
Yeah, you'd have got great odds, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I had a colleague who, I think he put a bet on Tom Dearden to get player of the match, and Tom Dearden was paying like 23 to 1. So a nice little pretty penny there for him. But you just, it was hard to get a read. When Munster was leading the team out, he had a very sort of neutral look on his face, but he just looked like he was ready. We sort of spoke about it before we hit record here today, Martyn, but in terms of ranking that up as, one of Queensland's best series wins, it's got to be up there in the top 5, top 3. I think back to 2020 when, we had the worst Queensland side ever and we still won that series.
And 1995, the Neville Nobodies.
That's right. So I don't know, it's going to be hard to top those two, but God, it'd make a good third spot on that list. And
Yeah.
again, like, there's no denying on paper, and the game's never played on paper, but when you look at that Blues team, you know, they've got every reason to be the favourite, don't they?
Well, I tell you what was. I mean, you've got to give Billy Slater immense credit for every selection decision he made paid off, which shows what a smart guy he is. I mean, the two Queensland centres, Robert Toya and Gahamat Shibasaki, both very inexperienced guys. Shibasaki's story is quite incredible, I think. A few years ago he was a nobody, not really achieving anything. We might want to talk about him, as part of this discussion, but they were up against Stephen Crichton and Latrell Mitchell in the centres. Now, you would have said that's just no contest, wouldn't you, really? Those two brilliant players, both great players, Mitchell and Stephen Crichton, and yet the two Queenslanders actually came out on top, and there were so many crucial incidents in the game. One of them, of course, was when Robert Toya managed to avoid being dragged into touch, threw the ball back inside, and Hamiso, the Hammer, got the ball and fed Tom Dearden for the second try, and he could so easily have, that could so easily have ended with Toya in touch with the ball, and it didn't, and it was just little incredible incidents like that just worked so well for Queensland.
Yeah, no, you're exactly right, mate, and I don't know, I think they just, as a centre pairing, they defended so well. They got up quick and they took that time away from Latrell and Crichton. And that's the last thing you want, is them getting early ball and a bit of time to use their footwork and power to overpower the defender. But yeah, just on Shibasaki, his story, as you said, very inspiring. I think he came through the ranks at the Broncos. I think he debuted at the Broncos, but didn't really cement himself in that starting lineup. Moved around the league a little bit, spent time at the Knights, spent time at the
20 and
Cowboys.
21, which were the COVID years, wasn't they? And he never really seemed to get a break there, and they let him go at the end of the 2021.
Yeah, and then spent a
bit of time
few
in
games
Japan,
in Japanese rugby. Yeah,
he did. Yeah.
He came back and he was actually living in Townsville playing for the Blackhawks in reserve grade, about to throw it away basically. And it wasn't until I think the Broncos had an away game up in Townsville late last year, and he caught up with some of his old mates, Paddy Carrigan, and Paddy Carrigan basically said to him, "Yeah, don't give it up now. Give it one more crack. Come down to Brisbane. You can live with me. We'll get you, a position at Wynnum Manly, playing Queensland Cup for Wynnum Manly Seagulls." And he said, who knows what can happen, because they obviously have a close relationship with the Broncos. And then, luckily enough, he did that, and then Madge gave him that train and trial deal with the Broncos over the off-season, and then he was able to force his way into the starting lineup for round one. He actually said in one of his interviews last week that might have been day 1 or 2 of the pre-season camp at the end of last year, Madge actually sent him off the field and said, "You're not fit enough. Come back when you're fit enough." And then, so he had to work hard over the Christmas period, came back in January, and trained the house down apparently, and earned Madge's respect, and earned himself a starting spot.
Which is a difficult thing to
back.
do. Madge doesn't give respect easily, does he? But and you've got to give enormous credit to McGuire for spotting that innate talent in Shibasaki and putting him in that first game. And that first game, of course, of the season, they went down to the Roosters, and I think they scored 50 points against them, with Shibasaki scoring a try. And from that moment, his position in the team seemed to be sealed, didn't it?
Yeah, and when you watched him play last night, you thought to yourself, well, he fits right in here. Like, he didn't look out of place at all. So,
absolutely.
He's 26 or 27 years old, and I'm sure that contract that he's on now will definitely get upgraded for next year, I would imagine. So,
you would imagine so.
Yeah. So just a really feel-good story there. But I must say,
other feel-good stories. I mean, Josh Leigh being brought back into the squad after he'd retired in 2023, and he got a phone call from Billy Slater saying, "I'd like you to play," and he could have easily said no, couldn't he? But didn't. And,
Especially, I think he had just had another child. Like his wife gave birth just last week, so he came into camp late because he was at hospital with his wife. And yeah, it's great to see him coming back and then retiring again as a winner.
Absolutely,
and he played so well.
Yeah, I mean, he only played for 23 minutes, but started and laid the groundwork for what was an incredible first half by Queensland. I mean, Queensland had the ball 22 sets, and they completed 22 sets. They completed at 100% in the first half, which was quite incredible, really, and explains a lot about why they won that first half by 20 points, doesn't it?
Oh yeah, and that's it. Like if you can complete your sets and you can defend your line, who's going to beat you? And to be honest with you, they sort of carried that on into the second half. I think they might have only had a couple of errors in the second half, but I think by the end of the game, their completion rate was like 94 or 95%, which is unheard of, especially in a rep game. But mate, yeah, it was a great win. I was disappointed that it's on a weeknight. Otherwise, I would have been up partying all night. But when you look at the Blues side, Martyn, you sort of have to ask yourself the question: do you think they'll make changes for next year? There's been a lot of speculation. Poor old Laurie Daly, that people are asking, is he the right man to keep coaching this Blues side?
Well, I think the problem for New South Wales is that I'm not convinced that Nathan Cleary was fully fit. He was carrying a big bandage round his thigh, wasn't he? And he's had a groin problem apparently, and he looked like a player. I mean, he's a brilliant, great player, but he didn't look to be firing on all cylinders on Wednesday night. It's the old adage, isn't it, that you pick injured players for big games and you pay the price for it, and you can't afford a player, even one as good as Nathan Cleary, not playing at 100% in a game such as this. And I think that was at the heart of New South Wales problems, really, to be honest. And I got the feeling that the rest of the team sensed that Cleary wasn't at full blast, and I think that feeling of, it permeated the team, and they lost confidence as a result of it. So, as I say, my advice is never to pick for really big games like Challenge Cup finals. We've seen it so often, actually, in Challenge Cup finals over here, that a team rushes to get a player back for the big game when he's not fit, and it rebounds on them. Keith Senior in 2005. I even go back to the great Bill Ashurst in 1979. It just doesn't work, and you've got to have fit players for big games, in my opinion. And I don't think Nathan was at his best, and he seemed, Nathan was obviously very upset by the defeat, because a lot of people are saying that he just can't crack it at Origin level. He can't lead the Blues to a series win, and of course I think that's a nonsense, actually, if it was a fit Nathan Cleary, but he's now got to show it again next year, I guess.
Yeah, that's right, and yeah, the knock is, he hasn't dominated Origin yet, and he's still young. He's got plenty of time to achieve that. I think people are waiting for him to have that 2023 grand final performance at Origin level,
Yes.
And then you look towards someone like Tom Dearden, who's only played a handful of Origin games, especially as a starter, and it seems like every game he starts, his fingerprints are all over the match.
Yes.
So,
well,
do you think?
I think we ought to start a rumour that the next Superman film is going to star Tom Dearden, isn't it? Because he actually played He actually played like Superman, I thought. He was absolutely everywhere. Everything he did turned to gold, and he's such. I mean, his fitness must be incredible because he was charging about in minute 80 as much as he was in minute one, and it was a truly incredible performance, I thought, and thoroughly deserves the Wally Lewis medal. Now, who would you pick as your halfback for Australia in the Ashes series? Would you pick Nathan Cleary or would you pick Tom Dearden?
Yeah, good question. I wouldn't be surprised if they try go with the.
Try go with Wilson.
Yeah, they'll probably go Cleary and Munster with Dearden perhaps in the 14 role maybe.
Yeah.
Or in the squad. I wouldn't even complain if it was a Cleary and Dearden combination.
Although you couldn't really keep Munster out, could you, at the moment?
No, that's a tough decision.
Yeah.
I mean, hey, we'll see what happens at the end of the season. We might have some injuries by then, but I hope not because it's a good headache to have.
But whose headache will it be? That's what we want to know. Who's going to be the coach?
Yeah.
Why haven't we had an announcement about the Aussie coach yet? That's just absolutely ridiculous that we're so near to an Ashes series and we don't know who the coach is going to be, and there are all these rumours that there are no hotels booked, no training facilities booked, and so on for the Australians this year. I mean, I'm delighted actually because I'd love nothing more. I'd love nothing more than the Aussies to get to England in a sort of disorganised state. But if you're an Australian, I can't believe that that's what you'd want.
Mate, the job can't be too hard, coaching your country's best rugby league players, right? I'll put my hand up and go do it, perhaps.
Well, I'm sure you do a great job. I think the key thing, though, for any Australian coach is to integrate the Blues and the Maroons into a single squad. And when they've spent all this time knocking seven bells out of each other, it's not necessarily the easiest thing in the world, is it? I wouldn't have thought to actually integrate, Dearden and Cleary and Munster and all the other Blues players when they were trying to knock his block off basically for 3 games. The Queenslanders play with a spirit that I don't think the Australians can necessarily match, if we're honest about it. And I was reading an article by that dreaded rugby union guy, Peter Fitzsimons, in the Sydney Morning Herald, but he did make a really good point that all the time, whenever Queensland play Origin, they always play beyond themselves. The whole is always greater than the sum of the parts, and that's the Queensland spirit. And I think it's because Queenslanders, and you are one, so you tell me whether I'm completely misjudging this, but I think Queenslanders put Queensland first and Australia second. They're Queenslanders are Queenslanders first and Australians second, whereas New South Wales people are Australians first and New South Wales people second.
Yeah, I mean, there's no denying we're very proud of our state, and the thing is with our state, it's such a big landmass when you compare it to, other states, not only in Australia, but I guess other countries as well. And I
think England would fit into Queensland about 10 times over, wouldn't it?
Just about. But yeah, it's hard, mate, because you listen to Billy Slater talk in his interviews, you listen to the leadership team talk, and they're always talking about how, much the jersey means to Queensland, and they're doing it for Queenslanders, and this is the highlight of some Queenslanders' year when they're going through tough times, drought, floods, that sort of thing. They all look forward to their Origin football, and they do a really good job.
They almost seem to relish tough times, don't they?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And then there's also that chip on the shoulder where we're sort of north of the border, and everything happens around Sydney, and we sort of get forgotten about a little bit. So we definitely got that chip on the shoulder, underdog sort of feeling. But I mean, I'd like to hope at the moment it would be easier to get the Blues and the Maroons together to work as a team than what it would have been when we were in that 8 straight period when we were just dominating New South Wales every year. I think back then it would have been really hard to get someone like, Cam Smith and Paul Gallen to embrace one another. I mean, they did
Yeah.
it, but it would have been a challenge.
Mm.
But yeah, mate, I'm not sure what's going to happen there with the coaching position. We all thought Brad Fittler was going to take that job, but he pulled out of the race, and I think he was a little bit alarmed by some of the things you raised in terms of the organisation of it all. Kevy Walters could be the man to take over as coach. I think
Well, it
he'd be an
looks
all
like
right
him at
pick.
the moment, doesn't it? It looks like Kevin Walters. So if it is going to be him, they need to announce it soon and get things underway. And now that the Origin series has ended, maybe they'll feel that they've got the time to do that. But they need to move fairly quickly now. Time is running out if we're not careful. And that Wembley date, October the 25th, I think it's just 3.5 months away now. So we need to see some action.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. How
By
many
the way,
spare
did you
rooms?
notice, sorry, I was just going to say, talking about the Queensland Spirit, I don't know whether you noticed, but there was one quite notable young woman at Accor Stadium on Wednesday night wearing all dressed up in Queensland gear. It was the Queen's granddaughter, the late Queen's granddaughter, Zara Phillips, and her husband Mike Tyndall, who were both, amazingly enough, both at the Origin game supporting Queensland when they're actually on a tour with the British and Irish Lions, the rugby union touring team, who were actually playing at the same time in Canberra against the Brumbies in Canberra. But instead of going there, they went to the state of origin to support Queensland, which I thought was pretty interesting and great to see. And of course, her brother, a young man called Peter Phillips, the Queen's grandson, many years ago played rugby league himself at Exeter University and was a very strong Brisbane Broncos fan. So maybe that attachment to rugby league is running in that particular branch of the royal family.
I hope
Great to
so, mate.
see.
Hopefully, we can get the rest of the Royals to maybe the Ashes this year.
It'd be nice, wouldn't it? Yeah, I'm not sure King Charles is a sports fan, actually, if I'm really honest about it. He's much keener on ecological things and so on. So, and gardens and that sort of thing. He's artistically inclined rather than being sportingly inclined. But not everybody's the same, I suppose.
Yeah, we won't hold it against him too much, mate.
No, no, not at
Uh,
all. No, no.
I was going to say, mate, how many spare rooms do you have? I'm sure we could get the Kangaroos to perhaps come and fill up some of your rooms if you had some spare ones at your
Well, we
house.
can put them in the garden. Put a tent up in the garden.
All right, mate. Well, we might wrap the Origin chat up there, unless there's anything else you want to touch on.
No, no.
Um,
Well, the only final thing to say is I don't know if you watched the press conference afterwards that Billy Slater, Cameron Munster, and Josh Papali were all part of, but I'm always so impressed by the way that Billy Slater speaks about his team and about Queensland and about rugby league more generally. He's a remarkably eloquent man and speaks from the heart all the time, but speaks in a way that's really calm and controlled, but very smart. And you've got to say, I think he's an absolutely outstanding individual, and I think Queensland are incredibly lucky to have him as their coach. And it's interesting after that first game in the series at Suncorp Stadium when the Blues came up and beat you 18-6, people were starting to write Billy Slater off. I mean, this is incredible in sport, isn't it? That you have one defeat and people start questioning everything about you. And that criticism was incredibly misplaced, as we saw this week. And Billy Slater just goes from strength to strength. The interesting question for me is whether he is ever going to coach a club or not, or whether he will just always coach Queensland and nothing else. I mean, we've said in an earlier podcast that he could be a great coach of Australia as well, but maybe just Queensland is the thing that he is emotionally attached to and will never leave.
And it's interesting, like hearing Cam Munster's comments at that presser as well. He sort of said, like, it's no disrespect to the Melbourne Storm, but there's just a stronger connection for him to the Queensland side in that Maroons jersey. He said you can't really define what it means. And I think for Billy, like, why would you want to go be a head coach for, the duration of a season when you can have a 6-week period in the middle of the year when everyone's eyes are watching? I'm sure he probably gets a few grey hairs through that 6-week period. But yeah, I agree, mate. He would make a great NRL coach if he decided to, but it's just whether, he wants to commit a full, his full-time schedule to that.
Well, the only club I could imagine him coaching, if I'm really honest about it, would be Melbourne Storm when Craig Bellamy eventually retires, which nobody knows when that's going to be. But I could imagine Billy, because he's obviously so strongly linked with Melbourne from his playing career, that maybe that would be the place that might be able to tempt him. But who knows? It would be an important and of course he would. I don't think he'd want to quit Queensland under any circumstances, and I don't think you can do two jobs at once. Personally, I think you one or the other. So maybe that wouldn't happen.
Why don't we touch on some of the important news topics that has taken place over the last week or so? Danny McGuire standing down.
Yeah.
Surprised by that one?
I was surprised by that one, yes. Danny was appointed to his first head coaching job at the start of the year by Martyn Jepson, the owner of Castleford. Martyn terminated Craig Lingard's coaching job at the end of last season when I thought that was a little harsh. But he went with Danny, and Danny had been the assistant to Craig, and prior to that he'd been the assistant to Willie Peters at Hull KR. So, and we're just over halfway through the season now, and Castleford have had a strange season, a hot and cold season, playing well one week and then badly the next. They started well at Hull KR, but then they've had some bad results more recently, and last weekend they lost at home to Huddersfield. But I didn't think that was quite as bad as some people suggest, because I actually think Huddersfield are a better team than their position on the league table would suggest. So harsh, and Chris Chester, the Castleford director of rugby, has taken over for the rest of the season, and we'll see what he makes of things there. But I do feel that Danny didn't have the playing squad that could really make a big impact in Super League this year. And it's not, it's not like if he'd had a really top squad and failed to get decent results, I think that decision to terminate him would have been much more understandable. But I think he can count himself very unfortunate, and who knows what the rest of the season holds for Castleford. But I was really disappointed.
Yeah, I wonder what his plans are going forward, where he sees himself. Surely in another coaching assistant role somewhere, you'd imagine.
Well, the obvious thing would be an assistant coaching role at Leeds Rhinos, which is the club that he obviously spent his career with, most of his career at least, until the last couple of years at Hull KR. But Danny McGuire used to be part of the furniture at Headingley. It was hard to imagine Leeds without him. He led them to that incredible 2017 grand final win, and he was just a brilliant player and a great guy. So I could certainly imagine him going back to Headingley. I don't think that Leeds or anybody else should think that just because he's had a mixed season so far with Castleford that he can't coach, because I think that would be the wrong conclusion to draw, and I would not expect to see his coaching career finished. Not by a long shot.
Yep. The other news, mate, there's been some international quota changes. Are you across those details? It looks like we're going to be able to have some more international players per club.
Yes, it's going to. Yeah, this is quite a controversial move, actually. At the moment, clubs can sign 7 quota players, but now it looks as though from next year they're going to be able to have 10. And this move has been brought in to enable English Super League clubs to sign players from competitions like the Queensland Cup. The eligibility criteria have been relaxed so that the clubs can sign, hopefully, more players like Caius Fatili, who plays at Wakefield, who's been a sensational signing, actually, and Ethan O'Neill at Leigh Leopards, who's been equally effective after not having burst through into the NRL. So there are a lot of players who would be potentially suitable for to fulfil these quota rules. But the worrying thing for me is that to have potentially 10 overseas players in any Super League team, they seem to be going down this route because there's a lot of rumours that next season we might have 14 clubs in Super League. And of course, there's the old question of where will all the players come from to fully equip 14 Super League teams. Quite a lot of people say that there aren't enough players of Super League quality in England to actually enable a 14-team Super League to be competitive. But the real issue in that sense, Jake, is that if we had a 14-team Super League, it's like having a 12-team Super League in a sense that it's not that the players are not of sufficient quality, it's that they're not distributed evenly among the clubs. You have some clubs that are able to corner great players, obviously the clubs at the top of the league. You've got clubs at the bottom of the league like Salford, for example, this year, who are having to beg, steal and borrow players and getting beaten by heavy scores most weeks, unfortunately. So it's a case of how do you distribute players as much as, what's the overall quality, in my view.
Yep. Yeah, no, I agree, mate. It also will take the opportunity away from a lot of juniors coming through as well, I'll imagine. I mean, maybe. Sorry, carry on.
No, you go on.
I was saying it might not have as much of an impact with, if we are to expand to 14 teams, but, it is, if teams are going to be signing 28, 29-year-old Queensland Cup players over giving their 18, 19-year-old juniors a run, I think that's a bit of a backward step.
Yes, and there's another element to this, though, that has received a bit less publicity, actually, and that is that teams in the Championship below Super League, oddly enough, there's no limit on the number of overseas players that they can sign at the moment, which seems counterintuitive in a sense. So a team like Bradford or any other team, London Broncos, for example, they could sign an unlimited number of players from the Queensland Cup or the NRL or anywhere else. And apparently, next season, that is also going to be changed. And I think they're going to be limited to about 4 overseas players, four quota players. And the idea is that all the players who come through the Super League clubs' academies, who reach the age of 19, but who aren't then able to quite be good enough to step straight into a Super League first team, they will then go in greater numbers to the Championship clubs to gain first team experience there before perhaps, for maybe a couple of years, before then being able to step up to Super League. So there is a bit of method in the madness, I've got to say, Jake, and that's how I understand this is going to work. I'm still very unsure about it, if I'm honest, because I would reduce the number of overseas players rather than increase them. But there is a rationale, I think, that's not really been fully expressed so far, but it is there.
Yeah, Yeah, well, I mean, the way you've just put that, that does make a bit more sense. But we'll move on to some other news, mate. John Kear stepping down as the Wales head coach. We've had John on the podcast a few times.
Becoming the Batley Bulldogs head coach. Yeah, good right. Old John. I mean, John is another guy. I mean, we you know, a wonderful rugby league guy who's got coaching in his blood, basically. John Kear. I mean, it's not. I think his last coaching job was at Widnes, which ended in 2023. But he's keen to get back on the week to week grind. It doesn't faze him at all, and he stepped down from Wales in order to be able to do that. And it's a shame in a way because he's done a really great job with the Wales Rugby League team, and they'll now be looking for somebody to replace him. But I hope he does a great job with Batley because it's a historic old club that's struggling a bit in the Championship this year, and if anybody can reinvigorate their spirit and performances, it will be John. And he's coached them before, by the way. And you know, John is an incredible motivator of players, and in that sense, is a bit of an older Billy Slater, I suppose you might say. And if anybody's going to get the Batley players playing well, I think it'll be him.
Yeah, no, it's great to see. And just when we spoke to him, you know, you could tell just by the way he spoke, the passion he spoke with, he would make a great coach to play for, I think.
Oh, no doubt.
But mate, another former colleague of ours who has come on the podcast a number of times, the great Gary Scoffield. He turned 60 recently, and yes, I believe he's in Australia at the moment. He's touring. He was at the Origin last night, I think, for his first Origin match, I believe. I heard him say it on the Matty Johns show. He appeared on the Matty Johns show and was a great guest. And,
yes, well, as he always is.
Yeah, sitting on that couch with Brian Fletcher, Benny Elias, Nathan Hindmarsh, and Matty Johns. Yeah, it was great seeing him get that recognition. And
he
just
gets more recognition in Australia than in England, if we're honest about it, Jake.
Oh, no doubt. And hearing how glowingly Matty Johns spoke about him, and Matty Johns was openly saying how much of a fan he was of Gary Schofield as a kid growing up, and then how Gary was one of his favourite players. And he went on his podcast this week with Cooper Cronk and spent a lot of time on that podcast talking about having Gary on the show the other night and how much he admired him as a player. So it sort of made me realise it was a bit, I don't know, I was proud that we were giving him a lot of credit, but it made me wish that the game in England maybe showed him a little bit more or appreciated him a little bit more, perhaps.
Yeah. We don't show the respect to our former great players that I wish we did. We ought to show far more respect. The RFL but rugby league fans generally, people like Gary. The great thing about Gary that was so great for us in League Express for all those years that he wrote for us and when he'd come on the podcast is that he was absolutely unafraid to express his opinion about anything, and he didn't care whether he never tried to tailor his opinion to gain the approval of his audience. You know, that's the point about Gary. He would say things that were controversial if necessary, because he actually believed them. And that was the point. He was as honest as the night was long, and still is still, I mean, I'm not at all surprised that he's been so warmly received in Australia on all those broadcasts that he's done. And the Australians recognise a good one when they see one, don't they? And I just sometimes wish that we did. And I always used to get really cheesed off with seeing English fans, you know, for example, even on the forum connected with our website, totalrl.com, people having a go at Gary for having opinions, you know, and for saying basically what he thought. And that's just pathetic in my view. That people should want to do that, and I've got such great respect for Gary. I mean, he played for Great Britain 46 times, which is more than anybody else apart from Mick Sullivan, who also played 46 times, but obviously is now no longer with us. And that's 46 times more than I played for Great Britain. And you've got to respect people who have, that level of achievement to point to in their lives. And I did, and I've just got enormous respect for him, and I'm so glad that respect seems to also be there in so many Australian rugby league people.
Oh, definitely, mate. And you don't have to agree with everyone's opinions, but if it's one person who's entitled to an opinion in our game, it's Gary Schofield. So
and Gary actually, and Gary actually loved it when you disagreed with him. To be honest, he actually loves a good debate and argument about rugby league. It's his passion, and it's amazing and great, just great to see.
Absolutely, mate. So happy birthday to Gary. He had a bit of a group of his mates with him sitting in the front row of the crowd, so it looked like they were all having a great time as well. There's a bit of back and forth banter between Matty Johns and those fellas, but it looked like they're having a great time, so I hope he's enjoying his stay here in Australia. Now, some signing news, mate. Wakefield have signed Jazz Tavunga from... where's he now? He's at the Warriors. No.
Manly.
Where's he at the moment? Manly at the moment. He was the Warriors last year, but he's at Manly this year. A good signing for Wakefield?
Yeah, I think he's in his late 20s, isn't he? He's not 30 yet. So, he's not really at the veteran stage. So that's great as far as I'm concerned. And I'm sure he will be a good signing for Wakefield. Wakefield are just building gradually and are wanting to cement their place. They've entered the top six now, by the way. They've entered the playoff places, and they want to keep building, and they want to become a regular playoff club. So, Jazz Tavunga, I don't know. I can't say that I've studied his game very carefully, so I couldn't speak with any authority about Jazz Tavunga. But he's got a great career behind him, and I'm sure that when he arrives at Wakefield next year, he'll be a terrifically valuable acquisition.
In other news, mate, Sam Lisone, he's going to be leaving Leeds at the end of the year, and he's going to join Hull FC, I believe.
Yes, wow. That's an interesting one, isn't it? Because I think he's been a real great acquisition for Leeds since he arrived there. And Hull have obviously made him a very substantial offer. And they see his sort of... he's a hard man to tackle. He's a incredibly strongly built guy. And when he's charging down the field, I'd be really reluctant to stand in his way. And he takes some stopping, clearly. And they've already got Herman SAS, and the thought of a front row of Sam Lisone and Herman SAS is quite an interesting thought, isn't it? I mean, Sam plays mainly as a substitute for Leeds. He comes off the bench for most games, and I don't know whether John Cartwright at all would envisage doing the same thing when he joins them. But he's going to be an interesting acquisition. There's no doubt. And I'm surprised in a way that Leeds have not fought to keep him. Oh, well, I'm sure they probably did, but Hull obviously made him the best offer, presumably.
Yeah, I think I would have nightmares seeing those two charging at me as I'm defending underneath the posts. Imagine trying to pick which one. They're so dangerous close to the line.
It's better to talk about them than to face them, isn't it?
Absolutely, mate. In other news, Lewis Dodd, a little bit of uncertainty around his future at South. What do you think he should do?
Well, he actually had a conversation with Wayne Bennett last week, didn't he? And was selected in the team list at number 17 for the game they played at the weekend, which was at Manly. But then when it came to the game itself, he was actually um, he was left as the first reserve, effectively player number 18, who would only come on the pitch if there were head injuries, which there weren't in that game. So he didn't get a run out, but he came close to getting a run out. And I mean, I still hope that Lewis Dodd makes the grade in Australia for South Sydney, and that we see him on the pitch in the near future rather than in the playing for the club's reserve team in the New South Wales Cup. So I don't know, but he's on a really great contract at South Sydney. They're paying him a lot of money, and he won't want to give that up, I'm sure. But I'm also sure that he's absolutely determined to show that he's got what it takes to succeed at that level, even though he's had a disappointing start to his NRL career.
Yeah, and surely Wayne will give him a crack towards the end of the season. Like the Rabbitohs, they're probably out of the finals race. I know it's quite a close competition, but they haven't been winning many the last few.
Now they're 16th with 14 points, 6 points outside the top 8. So it's not a hopeless task, but if they lose again soon, then it probably will be, won't it?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, mate. Anything else you want to touch on before we get out of here? Actually, I saw Morgan Smitties scored his first try in the NRL last weekend, which was great to see.
He did, yes. Marvellous. I was really delighted for Morgan, and I'd be very surprised if he weren't in Sean Wayne's plans for England to face the Aussies at the end of the season. And I think he certainly deserved to be in there, to be perfectly honest, and absolutely thrilled to bits. It's just such a shame that Matty Nicholson, the other English player for Canberra, is out with an injury at the moment, which is a fairly long-term one. So, after such a promising start to his Canberra career, it's just disappointing that he suffered a serious leg injury, and that's kept him out for quite some time now. But Canberra just going absolutely crazy, aren't they, at the top of the league? It's just quite fantastic what they're doing under Ricky Stewart. Amazing.
Yeah, they're playing out of their skin at the moment, mate. All right, mate, how about we take a look at this weekend's matchups if you're happy to move on to those, mate?
Yeah. Just one other thing, though, to mention beforehand, and it's a very short thing, but you may not know that this week we've had a state visit to the United Kingdom from the President of France, Emmanuel Macron, and he's been around the royal family and Parliament and so on as part of that visit. And one speech that was given by the Speaker of the House of Commons, Sir Lindsay Hoyle, and it was fascinating because Lindsay Hoyle gave a speech and gave a very strong mention to rugby league in France and to the history of rugby league in France. Jean Gallier starting the game in 1934, and he actually lectured the French president about the Vichy ban on French rugby league, which was really fascinating. Which I'm sure that would be the first that President Macron had heard about that. But I was so pleased to see Lindsay Hoyle. I think most of the other guests in the room were a bit taken aback by the fact that rugby league played such an important part in his speech, but it was great to see, and he's a great Speaker of the House of Commons in my view. So I just thought we ought to get that onto this podcast as well, and say very well done to Sir Lindsay. I really approved of everything that he said and did in that particular scenario.
Oh, that's great. We need these important figures, mate, to keep reminding people that we've got a great sport that everyone can enjoy. So we'll get a few more Royals involved. We might get we might be able to get Trump involved as well, mate. He might come to Vegas next year.
Yeah. Well, next year in Las Vegas, absolutely.
All right, mate. This week, Thursday night, we've got Hull FC taking on Wakefield.
At Wakefield, yes. That's such a crucial game because it's between the teams that are in 6th and 7th. Hull probably need to win more than Wakefield. They're a point behind Wakefield. If Wakefield win, they'll be 3 points behind Wakefield, and that makes qualifying for the top six harder. But Wakefield are on a real great run of form at the moment. They've recently re-signed Josh Rourke and Lachlan Walmsley to new contracts. So, as I say, Wakefield are really playing well at the moment under Darryl Powell, and I think they might just be a bit too strong for Hull on Thursday night. Just 8 points, I think, could be the margin, if I'm honest about it, Jake. So, but I'm really looking forward to seeing this game. It'll be played in front of a really full house, I'm fairly sure, because a lot of Hull fans always come in big numbers to Wakefield, and it'll be an absolutely fantastic atmosphere, believe me.
Yeah, and then on Friday we've got Leeds taking on St Helens.
Well, another absolutely massive game. Leeds are third, St Helens are fifth. St Helens have had a revival recently. They beat Leeds at home just 2 or 3 weeks ago. Will they win at Headingley? Well, Leeds had that terrific win at Hull KR last weekend that was very, very, coming from behind to win. I find this game really hard to call, if I'm honest about it, but I'm really looking forward to seeing it. It's a fantastic prospect, and gosh, I think it could be a golden point game potentially. And I'm reluctant to name who I think will be the winner, because quite frankly, I just don't know, and it could be either team. And I think probably if you had to just prod me into giving a verdict, it would be Leeds by 2 points.
Yeah, it's a coin flip, mate. Coin flip, I think.
No doubt about it.
Who'd want to be a betting man? Put it that way.
Me, no, not me.
The other matchup on Friday, mate, we have Wigan taking on Huddersfield.
Well, Huddersfield have improved a lot in recent weeks. They had the win at Castleford last weekend. They look very effective as a team. They've got some of their top players back. They've got Matt Frawley from Leeds. I don't know if he's still going to be playing with them this weekend. I've not. I think he is. I think he's been named in their squad. But they will give Wigan plenty to think about. I mean, it's obviously Wigan without Bevan French, and Wigan are never quite as effective when they lack the threat of Bevan French. I think they still should have a bit too much power for Huddersfield in the middle of the field. So I'd say probably Wigan by 10 points, but don't be surprised if Huddersfield do give them a few more shocks than they might perhaps anticipate.
Yeah, it could end up being a lot closer than what people think. Moving on to Saturday's matchups, we have Leigh taking on Hull KR.
Well, again, what a terrific prospect this one is. It's funny, there are some weeks where you get games that are, you've got several really great games all being played together on the same weekend, and this is certainly one of them that ranks alongside the Wakefield Hull and the Leeds St Helens. Leigh again beat Wigan last week, and again came from behind. I think it was 8-0 down at half time, and they won 18-8, and they got a absolutely brilliant try that went through about 10 pairs of hands with Edwin Apapi making the touchdown. And of course, Hull KR will be without Mikey Lewis, who's out on a concussion protocol. So I think this could be a Leigh victory and a second defeat in a row for Hull KR, which would be a setback for them. Not a massive setback because, of course, they are 4 points clear at the head of the table, but they can't afford to lose too many more. And but I think Leigh might just beat them by about 6 points on Saturday afternoon.
Yeah, that'll be a great one to watch, that match. Move on to the other matchup on Saturday. We have Catalans taking on Warrington.
Well, I think Catalans now don't have any chance of getting in the top six. Warrington do have a chance. Warrington are just 2 points outside the six, so they will be desperate to win in France, and I think they will do. and I think they'll move up. They'll still won't be in the top six because whoever wins between Wakefield and Hull will be the sixth team in the competition. But Warrington will keep in touch, I think, and I think they'll win by about 12 points. I think the Catalans are still looking pretty ropey, to be perfectly honest, and I just don't see the Catalans improving until next season now.
Yep. And then we have Salford taking on Castleford on Sunday.
Well, interesting game, and the first Castleford game without Danny McGuire in charge. Could Salford shock Castleford? They could do potentially, but I don't think they will. I think Castleford may just have a bit too much for Salford, but it will be one of the closer games that Salford play this year, and I think Castleford will beat them by about 10 points. But don't be too shocked if Salford get their second win of the season. Their first one was against Huddersfield a couple of months ago, and it's not impossible to imagine them getting a second win on Sunday afternoon against the Tigers.
Yeah, they had an improved performance against Warrington last weekend, mate. It was at 24 to 12. They lost that match.
Yes.
Not the Salford we've been used to.
Yeah. 12-all. Warrington won, only in the latter stages of the game. So yes, it certainly, maybe I ought to revise my opinion, but I do think that Castleford will just probably have a bit too much for them. Yeah,
no, that's understandable, mate. All right, Martyn, anything else you want to touch on before we get out of here today, mate?
No, I don't think so. No, it's been a real pleasure to speak to you again, Jake, as always, and a great pleasure. I'm a Queensland fan, probably not in the same category as you, as a Queenslander, but I've always been a Queensland fan since the days of Wally Lewis, so which I remember and you obviously don't, being a bit older than you. But yeah, no, it's been a fascinating week, and it's interesting to see the great TV viewing figures for that game throughout Australia, particularly strong in Brisbane, of course. So no, it's been a fascinating week, but now it's all hands to the tiller for the rest of the season at club level, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely right, mate. We'll have to sort you out a Queensland jersey at some point, mate.
Oh yeah, well I'd be delighted. Yeah,
I've got one of those, one of the older school ones with the nice big white collar, and I forget what year it's from, but they're a bit more comfier than the modern day ones. I think the modern day ones are, very thin material, whereas I like the old school ones. All right, Martyn. Well, we might wrap it up and do it again next week, eh?
Great stuff. Great to see you, Jake. Thanks a lot.
You too, mate. Cheers.